Okay, I don't know if you saw the latest report about the fraud in Minnesota. We did a commentary on this last night, but we have to do it again now because of what happened earlier today. This was on Fox News. Jesse Waters Primetime had the story. This has been going on in Minnesota for years, and it's stuff that should have ended careers. This isn't just like a new thing that's happening because Trump is president and this is some sort of rebellion. No, 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 no. This is not an accident. This has been the systemic plan of a bunch of criminal Somalis in Minnesota for years. All right. It's a pattern. It goes back and it happens right under the noses of Democrat control, either because they're getting a piece of the action or they are completely too blind and incompetent or terrified to speak out against it because of the race and the color of the individuals involved in it. But back in 2018, Fox 9 did a major investigation on what they described as suitcases filled with money leaving the Minneapolis St. Paul International Airport, tied to this massive state program that they said was being ripped off. You know, the Fox 9, that is, said it was being ripped off and tied to fears inside the government that some of the money could be ending up in the hands of terrorists. Al-Shabaab, to be precise. Now, that's from 2018, not yesterday, not just since Nick Shirley started looking into this stuff. Since 2018, it's been going on. Now, you fast forward, and you've got the reporting that TSA flagged nearly $700 million in cash, okay, leaving Minneapolis St. Paul Airport in passengers' luggage just over the last 2 years. Let me do that again. $700 million, one airport in 2 years. And this is where it gets like truly insane. According to officials cited in that reporting, the cash outflow there from Minneapolis St. Paul wasn't just high. It was like so totally out of proportion to the other airports. They described MSP, Minneapolis St. Paul, as being 10 to 100 times larger than the total foreign exodus of money at other larger U.S. airports over the same period. 10 times to 100 times more out of Minneapolis St. Paul. And Waters said it's about the 17th busiest airport in the country. The largest airport in the country, or busiest, which is Atlanta, a fraction of the amount of money being sent out, about a quarter of the number of flights in Minneapolis St. Paul than what they have in Atlanta, and 10 to 100 times more money. So bigger airports, more flights, more traffic, and yet somehow MSP is the one that's sending the most money out of the country. So here's the obvious question. How does a little Midwestern airport become cash export central and the people running the state act like they have no idea it's freaking happening? I mean, how stupid do they think we are? Because the game here is up. Minnesota Democrats love their headlines when they're talking about the diversity of their community and look at how compassionate we are and how welcoming we are. But that diversity is bankrupting America because it's taking hundreds of millions a year, okay? Hundreds of millions a year out of the pockets of the American taxpayers. That's billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars. We found this out overall, the fraud. Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, talked about this back on Sunday. We're talking $300 to $600 billion a year totally nationwide. But literally, we're talking 700 million just from one little airport in Minneapolis, St. Paul. So they built a system so easy to scam that criminals treat it like it's a freaking ATM. And to the Somalis, that's exactly what it is. If you're a taxpayer like me, we are all suckers. We're the ones who are being taken in this thing. You're the guy punching the clock. You're the one paying every dime that you owe for your taxes. You're the one watching a political machine in St. Paul shrugging while money bleeds out of the state and goes to freaking Somalia. Now let's deal with the third rail, honestly, here. This isn't about race. This is not about attacking law-abiding people the way they want to, pinpoint it. This is about fraud, pure and simple, and about leadership among individuals refusing to confront it. Because when you have a money transfer system that's opaque, they're called hawalas, and even U.S. officials have warned it can be exploited or taxed by groups like Al-Shabaab. And that's the terror group in Somalia that runs the area where these halals are funneling money to, all right? Then it becomes a national security issue here. Not just a bookkeeping thing and not just a fraud thing and not just a man, I want my money back thing. Funding terrorist organizations like Al-Shabaab. So, and to be clear, there are reports of federal authorities investigating allegations that Minnesota taxpayer funds have been diverted in ways that could benefit al-Shabaab. Reuters did a story and notes that claims have been disputed, about where this money is going, but it is absolutely possible, if not likely, given who controls those territories, that al-Shabaab is receiving those funds. So this needs to be investigated further, bigger, deeper, because, the bigger point doesn't change. When you have hundreds of millions of dollars in cash leaving a little airport, you cannot account for where it's going. You have a very serious problem. And the people who ran the place for years own that problem. Jacob freaking Fry, Tim Walz. And that's the part that pisses us off even the most. This didn't pop up overnight. This Fox 9 story aired in 2018. 2018. So this is at least the last 6 years, and it probably predates that. That's just 2018 is when Fox 9 in Minnesota got a hold of it, got wind of it. It's probably been going on for decades. The cash movements began at least 10 years ago, probably more than that. Where were the Democrats? Where were the emergency audits? Where were the prosecutions? Where were the legislative reforms? Where was the governor acting like this mattered to him at all? Instead, we get the usual Democrat playbook: deny, deflect, delay, blame Trump. And if anybody else questions it, label them racists. I'm not playing that game. We can't play that game. We cannot afford to do that anymore. If you ran the state while this ballooned, if you controlled the agencies where all of these red flags were flying and you were ignoring them, if you let this money pipeline keep flowing like this year after year after year, what do you think would happen to you? What do you think if it was a Republican? What do you think if it was a Republican-controlled government in a red state and all of this was going on? Minnesota's Democrats didn't just miss this. They permitted it and, in fact, probably, not able to prove it, but probably profited from this because their enforcement was politically inconvenient. So they weren't going to enforce it. They weren't going to enforce the law. They weren't going to try to stop these people. They probably took a cut. And even if they didn't, then they just looked the other way. That's bullshit. And that's something we are not going to stand for. Well, a lot more of this for you coming up on Friday mornings, Strictly Speaking Unfiltered. Don't miss it on Rumble.